Gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Cyber Securing Your Bottom Line, our panel discussion on cybersecurity in manufacturing. My name is Mike Kiniyalocts, as Elise said, Vice President of IT for CBT Company, and I'm honored to be your moderator. As we all know, the manufacturing industry is undergoing a significant transformation driven by advancement in technology and digital enablement. While these changes bring about incredible opportunities for innovation and efficiency, they also introduce new vulnerabilities and threats. Cybersecurity has become a paramount concern, not just for protecting intellectual property, but also ensuring the continuity and safety of operations. Some of today's most prevailing cyber threats are ransomware attacks, phishing attacks, intellectual property theft, fraudulent wire transfers, and cyber attacks with malicious intent to disrupt or shut down your operations. Today, we have gathered a distinguished panel who will share their insights, experiences, and strategies for navigating the complex landscape of cybersecurity. Our goal is to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of the current threats, best practices for defense, and a glimpse into the future of cybersecurity in manufacturing. We encourage you to ask questions and share your perspectives. Without further ado, let's introduce our panelists and dive into today's discussion. Michael Picton and Brian Klenke. Michael is the managing partner and co-founder of Enduir Cyber, where his organization helps clients fortify their cyber resilience and helps prepare, respond, and recover from cyber incidents. Brian is the Chief Information Security Officer of Bath & Body Works and former CISO of Booz Allen Hamilton. Brian also has extensive experience in the defense and intelligence sectors. It is also worth mentioning that earlier in their careers, both Brian and Michael spent time together at GE building their cyber program, and later co-founded Morphic, an early pioneer in the managed detect and response market. They later sold Morphic to Booz Allen Hamilton. Brian and Michael, tell us a little more about your journey in cybersecurity. What can you tell us about the threats and trends you've seen throughout your careers?
Sure. Happy to start. So I got into cybersecurity very naturally. I majored in art, so that's a logical career path for that. But what I really love about cybersecurity is it's very creative, and it scratched that creative itch, and also you can make money doing it. So that was good. But yes, I really got started. I've been in the financial sector, Fifth Third Bank, places like that. But really got into it, I think, at General Electric. Joined General Electric at a really interesting time. The Joint Strike Fighter was being built and designed and tested, and so as you can imagine, there was a lot of money going into that to develop that, but also there were a lot of the adversaries of nation-state actors were very interested in the technology and the manufacturing processes that surround that technology, kind of soup to nuts. There wasn't anything that they weren't interested in there. And so that obviously made GE and anybody who was involved in that program a major target. And there were a lot of any kind of military or industrial kind of processes and projects that General Electric was involved in were pretty much also targeted. So what that meant for me was, and it was kind of exciting and fun. I kind of dumbed my way into that room where it was like, hey, I was just in the right place at the right time. I got to see a lot of crazy, insane things happen, right? That really for a long time did not get reported in the media. All the stuff you can read about now, years later. But there were crazy things going on, where we were literally up against, Michael was at GE with me. We were literally up against foreign intelligence services who were hell-bent on stealing, getting a hold of this information because it was competitive advantage, right? And so really, and for us, the mission was very strong. It translated into, our ability to create a superior product really meant, was the difference between life and death for the servicemen and women who operated that equipment in the field, in combat. And so you really felt like a sense of mission when you were doing that work. But this stuff was all kind of super quiet, super secret, because it was all classified work, things like that was going on. And so, it wasn't touching, like all businesses. It wasn't touching consumer lives. It wasn't, that you see today. It was very much like I would go to work and I would come home and be like, well, I really can't talk about anything I did today. Wow, it was really cool, but I can't tell you about it. So, but it was really interesting to watch that type of stuff evolve. It was highly sophisticated. I'm sure at the time it was expensive, highly expensive for, our adversaries to kind of levy those attacks on us. And it was expensive to defend against, very expensive to defend against. And gosh, you kind of fast forward through time. So, I did that at Lockheed Martin, and you get to like Morphic, and things started to kind of change as it kind of consumerized and commoditized.
Yeah, and then came ransomware.
And then came ransomware, and that changed the whole thing.
Similar to the way technology that was NASA technology is now in the palm of all of our hands. Kind of the same thing goes with the advanced tools and technology that these nation states were using. Now is in the hands of anybody and everybody. So, today there are marketplaces on the dark web where you have access brokers that are selling access that they've already obtained for companies. So you can go in and buy access. They also have ransomware kits that you can buy, so once you get the access, you can use it, and they have how-to, they have help desks. There's a very, it's extremely available. And, ransomware really changed kind of everything because, it's no longer, the defense contractors and the big banks and things like that. It's now everybody, whether you are, up at the top of the market, if you're in the middle market, no matter what industry you are. The internet is a bad neighborhood, as we say, and we all live in it. And so really nobody can hide from it. It's been very disruptive. So we've seen, quite a bit of issues. It's become now a thing where it's no longer, this clandestine thing that you hear about in the movies. It's now, I'm sure everybody in this room knows somebody or has experienced themselves, the impact of a cyber breach, whether you as a consumer or at your company or any of your suppliers that may have experienced something.
Thank you, Michael. Keeping with the theme of our topic, can you give me a recent example of a cyber incident that impacted an organization's bottom line?
Sure. So we do a lot of incident response. We work with private equity, so we have a lot of portfolio companies that we'll work with. And private equity, their mission, they buy and invest in companies and build value, and then ultimately want to exit those companies and turn around value for their shareholders. So we got called in to a manufacturing company about 2 years ago. They did assembly and distribution all over all 50 states in the U.S. This company was at the tail end of the hold cycle for this private equity company. So they had already put in a transition C-suite that was going to take the company public in about 8 months from when the incident happened. So they were, getting ready to realize the gain. This company was a very nice company. They had 70% of the market share in their market segment. So they were sole sourced by all of their revenue providers, which was basically the major payers. So Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Medicare, Medicaid, and that was where they got a lot of their revenue, and they were the sole source. So 70% of the market share. They had also made a lot of the right investments in cybersecurity. They had a chief information security officer. They had bought a lot of the right tech, and they had a lot of the right things in place. And then they got hit by Black Hat ransomware, which is a group called AlphaV that has been very disruptive. And the outcome was, for one, the ransom was $11 million initial ask on the ransom. They had double extortion, so all of their shop floor distribution, all their computers, and all of their call centers were completely locked up with encryption. So no parts were shipped and no orders were taken for 3.5 weeks total. And they ended up, if you look at the cost of the breach itself, the response, the lost revenue for that time, and the hurt reputation, everything, it was pretty significant. But that doesn't begin to describe the bottom line aspect of it, because fast forward to today, the IPO never happened 2 years later. And from a value perspective, that client or that company that had 70% of the market share, their revenue source, the major payers who were sole sourced before, changed the procurement policy as a result of this outage. And in doing so, they made it a dual source requirement. So they lost 50% of their market share. So the half of the value of that company's revenue stream went away because of the incident. So that's the bottom line impact. It was pretty severe, but and this is a company that actually made a lot of the right decisions.
So if this company made the right investments, how did this happen?
So what we find a lot, and we can bounce back and forth on this one, a lot of it is back to the basics. You don't have to go out and buy super advanced cyber tech and there's a lot of advanced tech out there now, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it does come back down to the blocking and tackling of good hygiene operations and good configuration. The expertise does not really prevail throughout all the different industries and market for cyber, and there's a lot of things where you buy and you'll rely on your third parties or your vendors. You'll set it, you'll forget it, and you got it installed and assume that everything's working the way that it should. And oftentimes it's those like default settings that come with the software and stuff that are inherently insecure. And like I said, a lot of the investments have been made here. There was just a calamity of issues that all worked against them. The threat actors are usually the first to take advantage of the things you missed.
Of course, I think we're good starters. We're not good finishers, and I think that's the challenge. We buy a lot of stuff. There's a lot of advanced tech out there. There's a lot of things that we can do, and a lot of it ends up on the shelf or half implemented, and really not managed in an ongoing fashion and kept up to date, kept up to speed, properly and fully implemented. And I see that. I look across industry and see the cybersecurity budgets have grown year over year. Of course. But it's like, how are those dollars being spent, and is the value of those dollars being recognized by the company? And you really find out in a breach if the value is there, right? And if you've not been doing it, you don't get the value.
What are some common areas where you find companies have a perceived sense of security, but they're missing things? What kind of things do you see?
I would say that there's people. I hear all the time, kind of classic. Oh, well, we have a firewall, and it's like, well, everyone has a firewall. That's the bad guys know you have a firewall. They have other ways of getting around that. And I think that people see this as a technology problem, and a lot of this originates, and tie back to your initial opening comments about phishing and things like that. Is this really? What the bad guys know is it comes down to it's a people problem in the end, right? And it is. I don't get to patch my employees. They are who they are and click what they click, right? But they're genuinely my biggest weak spot, and that's true of just about any company, And so ultimately, the bad guys know this too. They're well researched. They know what they're doing, and so they're really able to take advantage and exploit through social engineering, phishing. Some of the latest things that we're seeing. A group called Scattered Spider is really good at calling up help desks and impersonating, either another part of the help desk or another part of the organization or an executive and saying, oh, I'm the CEO and I need my laptop up right now and I got to have the password. And the help desk's like, oh, absolutely, we're going to help the CEO, of course, let's get the CEO back online right away. Well, they just help Scattered Spider do it. And in many cases, this isn't we joke about this isn't the Nigerian prince email, right? This is this is plain language, English speaking, native language speaking folks who know literally what to say, how to push your buttons, and how to get you to they prey upon that good-natured customer service mindset that we've trained into our workforce. And they prey upon that desire to help. And that psychology at work is really kind of the weak link. And so you can install a lot of things in tech, but it really kind of starts, I think, with the people. And I think that's carried through into how you kind of defend, So it's what IP projects, and then here comes the security team. Oh, we need you to fix all these 83 things, and you're like, oh, come on, what? Show me where this made $1. And it's like, well, I'll show you where it lost $1. Very, very easily. So you got to protect what you've invested in. You got to protect that product work, that product stream, and make sure at every step of the way that from there, from inception to customer, did it get there safely?
We were just in one, talking about the Scattered Spider one, where they sent a ton of emails, spam emails, thousands of them over the course of 2 days to 2 separate users. and then a call from the help desk came in that was from their phone number, coming from their help desk, and it was, hey, we're having this issue with email. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's been a lot of spam coming in. We think it's with a few of these accounts, so it was specific to that person. Can you help us out? And they had them bring up a Microsoft utility called Quick Assist, which allowed them to ultimately get access to that system and then move laterally in the environment and make the problems happen. And a lot of these cases, like where I say they've made a lot of the right investments, some of the things that most companies today now have, endpoint detection and response, which is software that goes on every computer machine, and it detects badness and alerts and has the ability to stop and contain things, when it sees something bad going on. And then the other thing is managed detection and response, which is, a service, third-party service provider that'll, be the eyes on glass 24/7, watching the alerts and making sure when something goes bump in the night that you have that containment. For those two acronyms, the EDR and the MDR, the key word there is the R at the end, the big R. And by default, a lot of these softwares, while they have a ton of capability to do the R, by default, they do not do that when you buy them out of the box. And the reason is, if you think about any sort of environment, a hospital with critical life support systems and things like that, you don't want to contain systems that are supporting human life. You want to have, there's some business context that you need to know about before you actually start, containing systems and taking them offline. So by default, most of these things are not set up that way. But for the most part, companies, if you go back like post-incident and say, if something happens bad in the night, I'd much rather you guys take the system offline. I'll deal with the users the next day, right? And these are things that most companies don't realize until after the incident has happened. But a lot of the capabilities that they have purchased, that they have at their fingertips, work with those service providers and make sure that those rules of engagement are in place, and that the R and big R can happen when it needs to happen, not just sending signals. You're actually seeing the action against the bad stuff when it happens.
Makes sense. What are some common pitfalls in manufacturing?
Well, for one, just to generalize it, I think back to the basics, the same pitfalls for manufacturing as any other company around enterprise IT. A lot of the incidents that we've seen where things have propagated into the shop floor and affected the OT environments and things like that often had to make it through many layers of enterprise IT first. So maybe it was a phish or an email, or they got in some way through the enterprise IT and then made their way over. But in cases where we see that work is where you have basic network segmentation, like the blood-brain barrier between your shop operations and enterprise IT. And these are some basic fundamental things that if you get those right, you're probably going to protect a lot of the shop floor stuff. And from an incident impact perspective, having a good recovery plan from an operations perspective. I mean, even if enterprise IT and email and everything goes out, you still have the ability to take orders and distribute and get the shop moving when things are down. Because when you are down, it's not even if you pay the ransom, and this is one of the big falsehoods that people think. I buy the encryption key and I pay the ransom, and now you just flip the switch and the lights turn back on. That's not the case, because the software, for one, the bad guys spend a lot more time and investment figuring out how to break in and cause the harm. They don't actually spend a lot of investment like making sure that when they give you the key, it's going to work right. So the keys don't always work right, but if you get an encryption key, it takes a lot of computer processing time to go and decrypt all of that data. So you could be out for weeks still, even if you have the recovery key. So you have to plan on weeks, and that's one of those items.
That helps with the ROI calculation.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I think that ultimately that's, number one, have a plan, right? And I think that's where a lot of companies, it's like, well, it won't happen to me, so I don't make a plan, right? It's like, well, if it does happen to you, you better have a plan, because you don't want to be figuring it out in the moment. But second of all, then you got to practice that plan. Yep. And you got to practice like you're going to play, right? Or it's going to be ineffective. And so ultimately, that means kind of thinking through, not just like, hey, how's the security team going to respond to this? How is the business going to respond if something like this happens? So I mean, we like at our company, we run exercises where it's like, if say all the point of sale systems are down, we treat our point of sale systems almost like a manufacturing floor, right? Because, I mean, we don't open email on it. We don't browse the internet on our point of sale system. It's literally there for one thing, ringing up customers and customer experience. So how do you protect that, and how do you recover that if that goes down? You know, do you know how long it would take you to recover your fleet? Every warehouse, every whatever, like, do you have any idea what it is? And you know what? Maybe, like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Like, get started, figure it out, come up with a plan and practice that plan, practice scenarios all the way through leadership, how you're going to do communications. If your shop floor is down, what are you doing with your workers that are standing around? They can't do anything. Everything's off. That's not, the cybersecurity people aren't figuring that out. That's a business problem, right? Have you thought of this, right? So those are the kinds of things you need to practice.
Another common item that we see a lot, manufacturing-wise, is there's a lot of third-party systems out on the shop. It's the control systems, the greasy machine in the box next to the CNC machine that's running the machines, and those systems are protected. Don't touch them. Make sure they keep running because that's important. But often those are the systems that your company probably does not have good visibility to because it's probably managed by a vendor. They're often legacy systems that have not been updated. They're out of date. They're on old operating systems. They're not patched, and the key there is just knowing what those systems are, having a good line of sight to the vendors that manage those, and try to contain those as much as possible. Usually, those machines really do not need access to the internet, or what limited access they need, maybe even back into the enterprise IT, is very limited. So you can contain those systems and isolate them so they are not exposed, because often those systems are not kept up to date with the rest of the company, and they're managed by somebody else.
Yep. What a mess. Can I just offload my risk and just buy cyber insurance?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, yes, that's a part of the strategy, right? Certainly, cyber insurance is a piece of this, but insurers aren't just going to pay for whatever, for one. Like, so if you're not doing your part, it's going to be harder to make that claim. And
there's a high bar now to get insurance because
yeah.
Ransomware caused so many losses that insurance, now it's actually pretty tough to get insurance.
Yeah.
You got to prove you've got some basic controls in place before they'll even insure you.
Yeah, or that will ultimately dictate your rate too that you get with them too. Mm-hmm. Like how much do you have in place? But I think ultimately, when you think about like cyber insurance, and you think like generally like you're going to hire like an outside investigator to come in and help you clean this up for most cases. Like your company, Michael. Yep. You're going to have you're going to have to put the pieces back together. But in the meantime, you're down. You're losing money every day. That's a business interruption. And in many cases, I've seen like a lot of companies don't have business interruption insurance. That's a different insurance product, and it's not covered by your cyber thing. So you're going to have to know, do I have the right insurance products?
And as of recent, another thing, when you look at your policies, there's something secondary business disruption as well. So recently, the CrowdStrike outage that occurred that affected me, I got stuck in an airport for 3 days because of the Delta outage on that one. But that can affect, could be a third party that has a cyber incident that affects you. And now a lot of the carriers are starting to look at those sublimits and change those quite a bit. So it would be something out of your control but affects you that should be, something that you could get for business disruption. It's something to look at with your insurance carriers. But no, insurance is not going to help your reputation. It's not going to get your shop floor running again. But one thing that a lot of folks do is kind of rely on, well, I'm going to call and make a claim, and insurance will, invoke, and they'll get, you'll start with an outside counsel, they'll get, an incident responder to do forensics and recovery and things like that. But the key is the insurance companies, like their purpose in life is to maximize premiums and minimize payouts. And so, similar if you get an offender bender in your car, you're going to call, your auto insurance company, and they're going to tell you, you can go to one of these three, providers, and you're going to do it at our price, and you're going to get the quality you get. And those providers, they're not necessarily serving you. They serve the insurance companies because they want the work that's coming from the insurance companies. So generally, it's that side of that market is kind of the, lower rates, higher volume, lower quality, and if it's, one thing you can do easy with an insurance perspective is make sure that before any of the incidents ever happen, that you have, a clear line of sight to what vendors you want to work with. If that happens, you have their numbers. You can get them pre-approved with your insurance carriers because you can lose critical hours and even days just waiting for insurance carrier to get all their vendors set up. And if you have that stuff pre-arranged, which is a couple phone calls to make happen, it can save you critical time and headache in an incident.
Yeah, and the key in this is like, insurance is kind of like your last line of defense, like when everything goes wrong, who's going to help me cover this, right? But it should not be your only line of defense. It should be your, in case of emergency, break glass. I mean, to Michael's point, like they're running a business too, and so they're not incented to pay you more than they have to, and it's going to ultimately cost you less to make the investments up front. An ounce of prevention is is worth its weight in gold, right? And so if you can keep the incident small, keep the incident, I'm not going to say you're never going to have a breach, but this is what I tell my executive team. I can't guarantee you I won't have a breach. That would be insane. But what I do strive for is to make sure if we do have a breach, it's very small, it's very contained, it's well managed, we respond well, and so my need to go and lean on the insurance industry is going to be less. But also, I mean, you kind of also have to, with ransomware, it's even really interesting because you get into, the insurers will bring forth like negotiators to negotiate with the ransomware actors. And so you've got this whole ecosystem where it's like, hey, the ransomware threats get into an organization, they hold it for ransom, they know that you have insurance, they know that your insurance will pay out, they know who the negotiators are who will negotiate the rate with them.
In many of the attacks that we see, they actually have found the policies. They know exactly what the limits are, and the ransom will be act exactly on the dime what
they'll report you to the SEC. Yeah. They'll so they know the game just as well. So ultimately, you kind of hate to say it, but like the insurance piece of this and paying ransoms propagates the business model. Right. Ultimately, that's how these guys are getting paid. Is
what if the malicious actor is a known terrorist organization?
Then you can't pay them.
Then you can't pay them.
So whenever we do payments in these, one of the processes, first you have to do an OFAC check to make sure that they're not associated with terrorism. So there's brokers that can do the payment and everything, and that's a part of the process. So a lot of cases it's not. So you can pay them, and generally it's about 50% average, the initial ransom ask versus what is ultimately
negotiated
paid.
down.
Oh yeah, definitely. And in fact, a lot of times when we know we can recover the business, oftentimes we'll have clients that will still pay because it's double extortion. They'll do the encryption, they will also steal your data, and just to have the data destroyed and not released on the dark web and not suffer the embarrassment, they will pay just to make sure that that's not happening.
But you're paying thieves, and they're promising to delete your data.
Yeah. Generally,
they pinky swear on that.
Generally they honor their word, but they do make mistakes.
But they do make mistakes, and then there's been a few groups that have just don't care. Like when you look at like the health.
We had one recently. So they're big organizations, and the parent organization took the payment. And they had a like a subsidiary basically that they did not pay, and the data they still had of this particular client, and they came back. The subgroup that did not get paid came back and tried to re-extort the client for the same data that they'd already paid for.
And the victim is just in the middle of this mess.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, it's very hard for law enforcement to get hands on these folks. So when you're the government and you're like, oh, we need a pound of flesh, someone has to answer for this, some of that starts to get directed at the victim then. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, oh, well, this is your fault. You didn't do a thing. Why didn't you do these things? And, and so you see subsequent things like SEC saying you have to, if you're publicly traded, you have to report, this was like last December, that you have to, you have to report within X amount of time and tell us, and then we're going to scrutinize you as, did you have the best practices in place? Were you doing the right things? And so there's a lot of second guessing and armchair quarterbacking that have come in because it's so hard to get a hold of these, the actual threat actors, because it's not like they're, it's not like they're up in Dayton, right? They're somewhere where they're just waving from a beach, over in Asia, over in Europe, and no one's going to touch them. And so that's a whole different conversation entirely of like, what do governments need to do about this to kind of have a, an effect on this? And regulation is one way, and getting people to do good housekeeping is one way, but like, coming from the defense background, until they're actually able to connect, like what in the military we call a kinetic response on some of these guys, like as in roll up in a black
Punch you in
van
the
and
face,
pull
yeah.
them away and make them go away. Like they're going to keep doing this with impunity. And in some cases, they're protected by the host nation where they're operating out of. And you can imagine there's probably payoffs and things like that. They're making plenty of money. They can pay people off.
Yeah, we're not going to control their behavior.
Yeah.
We can control or at least have an impact on the impact that they can have on you.
Yeah.
Brian and Michael, what two of the key things you'd like us to take away from this discussion?
I think one when we do like a postmortem on after a breach or after an incident with a lot of times we'll talk to the management teams and the ownership and the board, and also with the staff. Almost every single time after suffering one of these incidents where you're working 30 straight days, 20-hour days all the way through, it's not fun at all, and it's an extreme life-changing or life-threatening event for the business. Almost always we hear the same things. From the management team, it's often, if I only would have known that this is what we were going to go through, I would have done the things. I would have made the investments, hired the people, or whatever the things were. If we would have known, we would have done it. And then you turn around and you talk to the staff, and the staff says, we've been saying this for years. We knew, that like these things needed to be done. And we didn't get the people or the budget or the whatever. And and one of the takeaways from that is absolutely start having these conversations. And a lot of times it's not, a lot of the companies that we go into, it is not, some of the gaps that they have is not some massive investment that they need to go make. It's relatively small, and a lot of times it's working with existing, tech and existing capability that they already have. For just a little bit of know-how, you can really raise the bar quite a bit and minimize, the impact. So, just basic blocking and tackling and things like that. And, but definitely have that conversation and start working through that stuff, because there is a lot that you can do for a little. And I implore you, because it is way easier than suffering, one of these incidents.
And I would add in, so I don't do this alone for Bath & Body Works, right? I have a good team of partners, and Michael, you're a partner to a lot of companies. And I think my biggest advice is don't try to do this alone. Yes, I'm sure you all have very brilliant people that work at each of your companies, and they will tell you that they're super brilliant as well. And I'm sure that's true. However, they don't do this every day, And so you buy things, you think you know what you're doing with those things you buy. You probably don't. And so have a good phone a friend, have good partners. Who can you rely upon that will help you through both in the preparation and then if worse comes to worse, the response. And know who those trusted people are, have those relationships built, and be working with them. Don't be too proud, in other words, like to ask for help. This is not something that companies have to go alone. It will cost you money, sure, but it's going to cost you a heck of a lot less money to like hire Michael for a minute than it will to pay a ransomware actor on the other side of this. I can guarantee you that, and you're going to have a better outcome. So like I have an ecosystem of partners that help me through this. I know who my trusted sources are. And I push my team constantly to be like, look, I know you guys know everything. I got it. I know, but we're gonna get some outside perspectives in here. We're gonna get some outside point of view, and we're gonna make sure that we're leveraging the investments that we've made to the degree that they can be, and the degree it makes sense for our business. We're not just gonna be like, oh, Bill on the third floor, he said this was good. It's like, Bill's great, but I'm gonna crowdsource it a little bit. I think maybe, so.
Good. We have any questions?
So Jake this morning mentioned what's top of mind for everybody, which is AI. So how do you guys see AI impacting the severity of threats against organizations? And then the second part of that is, what is the cybersecurity
Well, I think it's helping both sides, the defenders and the offenders. A lot of the software now is utilizing AI to help find the anomalies and things like that. If you take some basic examples of how it may be helping the threat actors, not many years ago you could easily spot a phishing email because it would be broken English or it was very obvious. Now you have a very smooth talker on the other end, and a lot of that, things like that, some basic ways that AI is helping both. I think it's going to get scary. It's going to be interesting where it goes. I think it's important that AI is being utilized to help both. Knowing the adversaries have it in their hands, as a defender, you need to understand it.
Yeah, how fun is AI? I mean, it's so like. Yeah, we see like the speed and ability of the threat actors to like craft, create, and launch like a threat campaign, against an organization. That their time and investment to do so with the lever, with AI, is super fast now. Like they can pop stuff up, fake websites, great language, full capability. They can come up with. I mean, we've had, phishing emails or like through WhatsApp, like, voice emails that where you're like, it's a voicemail from the CEO. It's her voice. It's not her, right? They just need like a few minutes of her talking, which she's the CEO. She says lots of things in the public. So that's not hard to get. Give that to an AI, and an AI can simulate a whole conversation with her. That is today. That is, we've actually responded to that, those types of incidents. So that is on their side. However, it's a double-edged sword. Works for me too. I can look and say, hey, I know what Michael looks like on a day in and day out basis, and when Michael looks different than what Michael normally does, I want to check in on Michael and make sure Michael's doing all right.
I look a little different after a ransomware case.
Yeah, that's true. But I think we could profile both. So, AI is going to work in both ways. It's just going to, just keeps accelerating. But I would say like AI is not even like a future thing. It's like a now thing, whether you realize it or not. It's happening. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, bad actors, if they wanted to go straight, it sounds like they want to become a negotiator. That's probably pretty good with it. They have a network of people they can contact and work with. Maybe a little nefarious.
I'm not going to say it probably hasn't happened. I mean, there are a lot of folks in our industry that have played in the gray, throughout different times and in their career, air quotes around career,
One of our intelligence vendors, their CEO's in a prison in Moscow, and they're all ex the other side.
Yeah.
But they do a great job. They've got really good intel. They know a lot about the different threat actor groups and how they splinter. So a lot of these groups grow. They'll make a lot of money, and then the head will move out, and then the deputies will then move up, and you'll keep hearing different names. But a lot of these groups are the same people with the same tactics, and they're splintering out into to other groups. It's proliferating quite a bit.
Yeah. Nobody knows bad guys like bad guys, though.
Yeah.
How do you guys stay current with all this?
I think in my role, it's like it's happening every day. So it's impossible to not stay current. It's not a thing that's happening. This isn't like a once a year, once a week. There's something going on every day. Somebody's trying to do something somewhere. So but I think the key is is curiosity. I would throw that word out there. It's just constantly maintaining professional curiosity about everything you do. Why did that happen? What it's like whatever the 5 whys and 7 whys or whatever it is. Just keep asking why, like a 3 or 4 year old, and you get that information that you need, because oftentimes we come with, well, we got part of the story and that's the end, and then you're like, well, no, but why did that happen? Where did that go? And I think that's what keeps me fresh, is just that constant craving of wanting to why.
Yep. Curiosity is one of those things you absolutely look for in interviewing candidates for cybersecurity, because it is moving so fast, and if you're not really passionate and curious about it, it's really hard to keep up.
Yep.
We stay up to date because we're in a lot of these incidents we're seeing firsthand, and made me think of another question. A lot of folks that you sort of have the the compliance and regulatory aspect, no matter what industry you're in, you have some regulation or some framework or compliance that you have to keep up with. And back at GE, we used to classify our external threat actors in different ways. You have your insider threats, you have your outsider threats, and outsider threats. We classified regulators as one of those outsider threats because regulators can come in, they can shut down your business, they can take away, if you're a defense contractor, they can, take away your contracts or penalize you. And then you have, the bad threat actors that we're dealing with that can also come in and cause a lot of harm to your business as well. But the regulatory threat actors, they do not play, or they play by a very known set of rules. And that, hey, if you get slapped on the hand, you get a finding or whatever, you may get another chance, and there's a process, and you can follow that. These threat actors know that there are no rules, and they don't follow the rules, and they will take full advantage of it. A lot of times there's regulations that you have to follow for those regulatory bodies, which is important to follow, but don't be fooled by the fact that you passed your HIPAA or your NIST assessment or whatever that is, and think that you are secure. A lot of those regulations and a lot of those things are written by the bureaucracy for stuff that happened 5 or 10 years ago. And the stuff that these threat actors are doing is evolving, by the day. So, it's not, just because you're compliant or just because you passed your insurance, hurdle to get insured does not mean you're ready to withstand, an attack.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, from the OT perspective, on the machine network, what is the number one thing that we can protect against? The number one way that they hit from the OT perspective, what is the number one, what's one thing we can do today that will help secure us? We have a firewall.
Yeah, good, nice, okay. At least from my perspective, and Michael, you probably see a lot of different flavors of this, but at least from my perspective, I would say the first thing that I would say is that blood-brain barrier that you said. It is segment that. That is your OT environment, your PLC. Those things have no business being in the same room with your laptop. And I'm using room in a network sort of a sense.
Your engineer cannot get to that from his office.
Yeah,
He needs to get out there.
And
That's
I'd
fine.
stress both network segmentation and access segmentation.
Yep.
So don't have it tied to the same access authentication system as the system that people log into their laptops with.
The account I click on phishing emails with should not be the account I log into the PLC with.
Absolutely, and like the administration and the privileged access to those systems too, you want to have totally segmented as well, because we'll see even on the enterprise side, backups, which are so important now when you do get hit by one of these things, is the administration for backups. The bad guys, if they get in, if they get your golden key access, the AD account. If your backup administration, your VMware, and all of your systems, how you administer those is all in the same authentication, once they get that key, before they let you know that they're in your environment and they drop their encryption, they will go and delete all of your backups. They will delete the backups of the backups. They will bleach the crime scene and get rid of all of the logs, and then they will make themselves known. They will do double encryption on your VMware and those types of environments. So some of those basic things around segregating the environment, because a lot of times the way they do get in, it's going to be your enterprise IT.
Yeah.
I think there was another question in the back.
What first steps would you recommend companies who do want to ensure their security, even if they believe they've already made all of the right investments or if they're compliant with regulations?
Well, then test yourself.
Yeah.
Relentless preparation, right? So if you think you're good, that's great, and bring in somebody from the outside to help challenge that, and you will learn something in the process. The relentless preparation is try to do that, and it's not just have a pen test and see if they can get in. It's actually practice and go through the motions on some of these things. Like you're ready to go out and play.
Yeah.
Sunday football, they don't just go out and play. They practice all week long and all year, and that's really what I would recommend is get some of that outside viewpoint and test it.
Nothing to add, exactly that. Yep.
If you think you're good, that's like a red flag, because nobody, even the best that invest the most, you go to the big banks that are spending billions of dollars on this stuff, even they are not never good enough. It's something that is a continuous, it's a journey. It's definitely not a destination.
That's right.
The threat actors are people That used to be our slogan at our last company, attackers are people. They are not, it is not a piece of code that we just need to go and find, and now I can go find the same piece of code every time. It is a human being, and they are adapting and changing, and they are clever and intelligent, and they're moving quicker than you are. They only have to win once. You have to win every single time that you defend yourself against them.
And I can tell you right now, like many of these organized crime groups have a way bigger R&D budget than to attack you than you have to defend.
Yeah.
These are billion-dollar industries, and literally, like, they take some of that profit and they go back into figuring out how they're going to continue doing what they're doing. This is their service they're providing to you, so they invest heavily in it. And I guarantee you, you're not spending what they are. It's definitely an asymmetric budget, situation there.
Thanks. Great questions. Anything else?
Now that you've scared everybody, it's
Yeah.
time for lunch.
This is scary.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.